Okay, let's start from the top with the word magic itself. If I was to ask you what is a magician, you would probably say, well, I know what a magician is, and you'd raise your hand and say, well, it's obviously this, that, or the other. Okay, I then ask somebody else, and they then say something else again. All right, well, I'm not talking about here, card tricks. I'm not talking about juggling. I'm talking about, occult magic, because that's the subject which I've been talking about throughout the duration of this video blog to the most part. And I'm trying to explain yet again for one particular person who sent me a private message why I've got an issue with the people and the use of language associated with this community. Obviously, we got the two real founding definitions of magic. Number one, with by Aleister Crowley, magic is the art and science of changing in conformity with the will. And number two, by Dion Fortune, magic is the art and science of changes in consciousness in conformity with the will. Now you've got two different things there going on. Aleister Crowley just says change. He doesn't say what particular type of change in any way whatsoever in the initial definition. That can mean anything, absolutely anything. But whereas Dion Fortune says changes in consciousness. So Dion Fortune has changed the argument onto a more meditation, Zen, yoga type definition. It's more a question of changing your state of mind in her eyes. But with Aleister Crowley, he hasn't been that specific, but yet the word science is used in both definitions. Now, we could say that there are forms of both positivistic and anti-positivistic science, scientific methodologies which he used, but essentially the problem is that occultists don't actually understand essentially any of the ways in which the word science is actually used and used properly. Because you would have thought that someone whose principle, guiding light of their ideas, if that was science, they would try and dedicate themselves to try and finding out as much about scientific methodology as was humanly possible. Well, we got to think actually about what the scientific method is in, let's say, positivistic science, natural science, and then to see whether there is a connection between the way in which occultists look at science and the way in which natural scientists look at science. Within the scientific method, a hypothesis is created. Now, a hypothesis could be nearly anything, but it's got to be something that you want to be able to test. Let's say to test whether water really boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So you get yourself a thermometer which has already been, tested to make sure it does measure temperature accurately, and you can then boil water and see whether it boils at that temperature. Okay, or whatever. But within occultism, it could be to test whether doing a particular spell gets a particular result. You see what I mean? There's a bit of a difference there. Within a natural scientific method, you would then create two different conditions, at least two different conditions. And one would have an experimental variable, which is the thing you're trying to test. And the other lot, which would be the control conditions, would not have that particular condition in. Okay, and you would repeat the experiments lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of times, because that's what you have to do. And the process of going through this generates information, which we call data. Okay, which would normally be numeric. I mean, there's four different types of data in the social and natural sciences. There's nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio data, and they all have very different forms of tests which can be applied to those types of data, taking into account what it is you're trying to evaluate. And you need to design your experimental conditions and a repetition of your experimental conditions appropriately to be able to get the ability to test the data afterwards. Because you're performing an action, you're getting the data, you then have to analyze the data, and you do that traditionally using statistical tests. Now, these are very complex mathematical equations which are used to ascertain the probability in accordance with the experimental method that the experimental variable was the thing which has created the hypothesized results. And of course, if you get what you might consider to be a negative result, that would mean that the experimental variable was not quite powerful enough to be able to generate that particular result, and any apparent results were purely due to chance. Okay? From that, you then create a theory. you can then publish your theory, which could then get submitted to peer review, so that other people who see the same subject from different points of view can criticize constructively, okay, your methodology, also the equations that you've used and how you've actually applied it, and of course the conclusions which you personally have drawn for the purposes of generating your theory. Okay, and if it goes well to the most part through peer review, then essentially you can get your theory accepted. So that's quite a lengthy method of getting something accepted as, or considered to be either a fact or as close to facts as you probably can have, which will be something called a scientific theory. Okay, such as the theory of gravity. We've got facts as to how gravity works. That's the facts of gravity. What goes up must come down. You might say that large bodies attract small bodies. The theory of gravity is all the complex mathematics that basically goes into explaining how it seems to work that way. So that's quite big and quite complex, but you need to think about how close you are actually acting to these things if you're going to consider yourself to be using anything vaguely related to scientific methodology within occultism. Now, within the times when I've spent face-to-face with occultists and also dealing with occultists on the internet, there is a kind of occult scientific method, but it is a kind of occult scientific method because it doesn't necessarily fulfill the same structure as the natural science, physical science, scientific method, which I have just outlined for you. Okay, the first stage, perform religious exercise. Second stage, have strange experience, no matter what that is, as a result of your religious exercise, meditation, ritual, sigil, candle burning, whatever it is you're doing. Then the next stage is interesting because it's the application of the strange experience to a presupposition, such as that ghosts exist, angels exist, demons exist, and all the rest of that. And the strange experience is then used as proof that the presupposition, or the thing which is replacing the hypothesis in occult experimentation, is actually correct. So already you can start to see that there's a problem with the way of thinking and the structure of thinking associated with this occult scientific method. Okay, and then you come out with all the hard truth claims such as "it works," which is a phrase which I hate, and it's often based upon evidence as scant as "I felt it." All right, now essentially, from a anti-positivistic, or not using the standard scientific methodology that I've just outlined for you in the first part of this video, you could say that there is a validity to what you feel, what you sense, what you experience. But this is the personal experiential evidence. It's not necessarily as concrete or regarded as concrete as the natural science type evidence that I've spoken of in the first part of this video, okay? So that's why there's so many issues associated with occult experimentation, especially at the level that people on YouTube and out there on the internet may be doing it. Because these, hard truth claims are made, but there is problems with the methodology of thinking when you're going through the process of evaluating whether, whether these really are facts. Okay? So, why is it the occultists regard what they're doing as being factual? Could it be that in some cases the apparent results they get were in fact just down to chance, in which case they would not be and they could not be acceptable in any form of scientific way, and a definition of science applied to this proof of the existence of angels, demons, spirits, gods, or indeed the fact that a candle burning exercise will in fact revolutionize your life, is unscientific or indeed anti-scientific. Okay, so the word science is not appropriate under these circumstances. Now, I'm explaining this to you from the point of view of someone who actively looks out for these strange experiences and tries to have them. But what I'm also doing is explaining this to you from the point of view of someone who doesn't want people to just have a strange experience and then to extrapolate that back to ghosts or angels or karma or past lives or soulmates or whatever it is they're thinking of at the time, because that might not necessarily be appropriate. Okay? So from my experience, there's lots of strange experiences which do actually happen. So therefore, as a fact, I would have to say on the basis of my personal experiences, those strange experiences happen. I'm not prepared to, at this stage, apply the word science to those experiences. And I'm not prepared to use those experiences to uh, confirm the belief in various forms of beings. Okay, I don't think you can actually confirm the belief in these beings or entities that are mentioned in occultism at all. Remember that Aleister Crowley, who some people consider as being the father of occultism in lots of different ways, was in fact a lunatic who just took enough heroin to kill 10 men. All right, there was a section in the early stages of Magick in Theory and Practice where he said that you can develop psychic vision, and you might look at a jar of opium and see it as a seductive lady with a cruel, vindictive smile. Okay, well, let me confess to you, I was a student once. Okay, I saw drugs every day. There was always someone who was buying and selling. Of course, when I was in my 20s, I smoked a bit of pot, but never have I ever seen anything like. I've seen heroin, I've seen opium, I've never taken any of them, but I've never had a psychic vision of the type which Aleister Crowley described. So one could assume that maybe he was actually being rather delusional, and that's maybe the drug experiences which have made him assume that your psychic vision works in that particular way. And also there was some mention in Magick in Theory and Practice of using Goetia type or Lesser Solomon type magical experiences as a means of working out whether someone was a good enough person to do business with, when essentially there may be other ways of doing it, like using your standard human social skills to the best of your ability. I don't personally see the point in using something which is as unempirical as occultism as a means of working out whether someone is the right person to do business with myself. Okay? Alright, those are just a few views from the mind of Nick Dutch. Remember, I don't hate you or have any negative or serious negative emotions against you if you happen to be taking a different point of view to all this stuff than me. But I do just want you to think in greater detail and depth as to what the word science actually means. Okay, because Aleister Crowley applied the word science to mean being scientific and artistic and creative about life. That's why he would use examples such as getting fit to help yourself recover from a disease, or eating the right food so you can be healthy enough to fight off an unpleasant condition. So that's just being commonsensical and well researched about food science and about exercise. Okay? And so, but he put that under the definition of magic. So essentially his magic was essentially closer to the magic of thinking big that everyone in business knows about. It's a question of thinking intelligently about life and about the way in which you deal with stuff. I would like occultists to stop thinking in a stupid way, predominantly because I suppose one could say I'm a believer in the strange experiences I've had, that they have happened. And I therefore am quite open when I say this happened, that happened, the other happened to me when I'm on the internet. What I'm not prepared to do is to say that this is the proof of angels, spirits, gods, and all the rest of that. There's no real point to me achieving that. So if we are to, at some point in the future, actually have magic as a science, okay, so to speak, okay, then we've got to stop thinking stupidly and stop trying to prove that angels, spirits, gods and goddesses and all the rest of that exist. And instead what we've got to do is try and work out what these strange experiences could possibly mean, only through going through the process of having more of them and being more heavily analytical about what they really are saying about us. We don't know what they're saying about us, apart from the fact we have the capacity to have these strange experiences. That's all we can say at this stage. Maybe it'll change, but until it does, then we can't carry on deluding ourselves or other people. It would just be plain out wrong to do that. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thanks for watching the video. Rate, comment, subscribe, favorite, share, and all the rest of that jazz. And I'll speak to you again soon. God bless. If I can turn this thing off, of course.